So thank you for joining us here on the on this webinar to discuss disability sport with a specific focus on football. I'm joined by a number of eminent guests who I will allow to introduce themselves in just a second, but just to say thank you all in the first place for giving up your time and also for your contributions, not just to this webinar, but just generally in relation to raising awareness and participation in disability football. So the thing that I thought we'd do to start off with is just to go around the table and essentially allow you to introduce yourself and say how you're involved in the sport, and give us a bit of a background about yourself and what you're up to. So perhaps we could start with you, Martin.
Yeah, name's Martin Sinclair. I'm a former England cerebral palsy football player and a Paralympian. Now I've retired. I'm a co-founder of a CIC company called the Disability Football Collective to try and improve disability representation.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Martin. Bob, how about you go next then?
Hi, I'm Bob Young. I'm the chairman of Bristol City Cerebral Palsy Football Club. And I got into this because of my son, obviously having cerebral palsy. So we created this together, and fortunately it started to grow with support by people like yourselves.
Excellent, thank you. Richard, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I'm Richard Todd. I work for Cerebral Palsy Sport, and my role within Cerebral Palsy Sport is I am National Football Development Officer, so looking to increase opportunities nationally for people with cerebral palsy to play football as well as play frame football.
Excellent. We'll come back on to frame football later on. I think it's a very, very interesting topic. Alison, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Hello, I'm Alison. I'm also connected with Bristol City Cerebral Palsy Football Club. I am a parent of a child with cerebral palsy who uses sport as her main rehabilitation. And I've been involved with sport at quite a high level throughout my career. I've worked with the Olympic Committee, the Premier League, English Cricket Board. So I know the power and the voice that sport has.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. It gives us a bit of a broad overview. I'm sure we'll go into further detail about your personal experiences and so on as we move through the questions. But one of the things that I wanted to start off with, and it will be of particular interest, I'm sure, to you, Alison, and also to Bob, as you have children with CP. First of all, do you think there is a blind spot in sport for disability? Where is it most prevalent? Is football better than other sports for it? Is it across the board? And how does it compare to say 10, 15 years ago? And obviously that open that up for discussion as well.
I always thought that Britain was quite forward thinking in terms of visibility of people with disabilities, because as I mentioned before, I've worked with lots of high-profile organisations. I worked on the Paralympic Games in Beijing and London 2012. And I know, we're second in the medal table. And I thought, gosh, we're really doing a lot to promote disability sport, until I had a child with cerebral palsy. And I realised that I was given no information at all about sporting organisations and how that can actually help a child with cerebral palsy. A child with cerebral palsy needs to keep moving, needs to keep active. Physio is just boring if you actually get physio, which we didn't. Now, if I'd only been told about sporting organizations from either my GP, my pediatrician, teachers, special educational needs TAs, then I would have got involved in sport and football a lot sooner. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, but we did our own investigation, and luckily we found a football club, we found a riding stables, and found lots of disability sports organizations. But it's taken a while for me to track them down. If only I was signposted properly at the beginning, I think my journey would be completely different. We don't get any physio. My daughter uses sport for her rehabilitation. Any physio that we do get is just, it's not on the same level, and it's just not engaging. Sport is exciting, it's competitive, and it drives my daughter. And yeah, I wish we had been signposted better at an earlier age.
Yeah, no, I completely recognise that it's a common tale. And do you think that the responsibility, for example, lies with the government, local authority, or schools, or is it because a lot of special interest groups and charities are sort of picking up the slack, whereas that might be in essence a failure of government if you're having to be that persistent at finding opportunities.
I think it's about looking at the touch points, of a child with a disability. It is the schools, the local education authority, it is the paediatrician, it is physios. Not one of my physios or paediatricians that had ever heard of, Cerebral Palsy Football Club. They didn't even know about cerebral palsy football, So if they could have only signposted me. Charities do exist and they do an amazing job. But if the government were only to invest in an education program right from an early age, because as soon as Lily was 2, she could walk. We were discharged from any kind of physio and any kind of support, unfortunately. And that's when we turned to sport and trying to find out sporting organisations through charities. But, if the government only invested in these sporting organisations and in a signposting campaign, you could argue that children wouldn't need the physio, and they wouldn't need to invest in physio. They wouldn't need physio when they're older because they will have reached their full potential by keeping active and keeping supple and keeping flexible by using sport as a vehicle.
Absolutely. But Bob, is that quite similar to your experience? I know that it's Casey, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a bit older than Lily. So you might have some insights going a bit further back.
Yeah, I mean, what Alison's saying is correct. But for me, I would probably go back even further. I'd go back to the point of the hospitals for parents, because, I stand on the sidelines with parents and we listen to some of the conversations that they have. And some of their amazement about what their children are going to be expected to do in the future around things like surgery and stuff like that. But parents come away from the hospitals completely ignorant because the doctors and the paediatricians don't really give them the information from the start. It's an umbrella word, cerebral palsy. It's used all the time. What does it actually mean? How is it going to affect your child growing up? How will it affect the siblings? And how will it affect you as a couple? None of that's ever discussed. So for me, going forwards from all of that, I looked around for Casey because he was like me. He loved Arsenal. He wanted to play football, and I took him down the pitch. And, quite clearly I could see he was never going to keep up with the other kids. So I was trying to look for an opportunity where he could participate, but also be actually involved in the game, because the coaches didn't have any idea. And I literally went round all the FAs, knocking on doors, telephone calls, emails. Some responded, some didn't. And that's when I realised that, do you know what, there isn't enough out there. And even if the government put money in, the problem I have today is we've created something and still we're struggling for investment. Yeah. So even if they went out and helped us create the football clubs, that would be a bonus. But people have created the football clubs and there's still no support from it. And we're seeing the benefits. I've got 42 kids, 42 children that are all benefiting, not physically, but mentally as well. Parents are also benefiting from it mentally. It gives them a positive environment where they can spend 2 hours every weekend talking with other parents, helping them understand.
The aspect is overlooked, isn't it? Quite a lot.
100%.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I suppose, Richard, you've actually, as well as being an academy coach for Rovers, you're part of CP Sport, so you get to see it in the round as compared to other sports. Is football doing a bit better than other sports in your view?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been in my role for a year now, and prior to that, I was working for the Gloucestershire Football Association as an inclusion lead within there, and completely agree in regards to like what Alison said there in terms of, there's just no information on what's actually happening out there, no signposting, what opportunities are there. And football for me, from what I could see working across with my other colleagues, is a lot further ahead than most other sports. And I say most because there's some which I don't have as much sort of information on. But yeah, in terms of football, there's a lot more coming out, a lot more to come. But the main thing is the sort of getting the opportunities out there and making people aware. And I genuinely feel like it starts with schools and just getting the information into schools. Not to say that the schools should start up CP football, but can they signpost to what's happening out there and what's going on? And if they know someone who maybe wants to get involved in football, who has CP, and they can't find an opportunity in their area, do they know where to go to ask and find out about those opportunities? So, I forwarded opportunities to physios, to some SEND schools, and they've come back to me going, "Oh, great, we weren't aware of this," and you're like, "It's right on your doorstep." Like you need to be aware of this. So I think a lot of it is word of mouth, trying to actually get the opportunities out there, and how we get everybody talking to each other. And if there is an area where there's interest and people want to get involved in football, then we need to be going to the clubs, which is part of the work which I can do, and saying, "Come on, can you start something up here? Here's the support that we can give you. Get the opportunity up and running, and then there's an opportunity for people with CP in the area to play football."
Sounds like it's a mixture of two things, really, then, isn't it? Because you talked about SEND schools, but also a lot of kids with CP aren't in SEND schools; they're in mainstream education, and so you might expect SEND schools to know where to signpost. You wouldn't necessarily expect the local comprehensive to know where to signpost. So I think it's the responsibility should be with the school, but actually, I wonder whether there is, if you had a block of funding that was designed to only be for club outreach, and so the clubs are reaching out to schools and educating comprehensive schools on the opportunities that are out there, and particularly if they have an academy or a program themselves, then so I think maybe a mixture of the above might be useful. And obviously, Martin, you've got personal experience going way back. Grew up in, we both grew up in around Bath, and you had a particular experience of the disability blind spot in football at club level, and I wonder whether you could tell us all a little bit about that, because it is actually quite shocking, that part of your journey and everything you had to go through, and that's coming from a footballing family. So you've obviously got more. You've got people around you that play football and know clubs and know people, and it was still a bit of a struggle at club level when you were growing up, wasn't it?
Yes, it's mad, really. To be honest, see, it's not improving, but like the perception of a disability, everyone's got different views of how you see a disability. But I think most people in schools focus on what they can't do, rather than what they can do. And I can remember when playing football, when getting kicked out of football teams just because I had a disability, because they didn't have enough knowledge or education, and then went to another team, and the manager was absolutely brilliant because he saw the other side of football, seeing how it brings my confidence out, the teamwork, bringing people together. And then I scored a hat-trick against the team who kicked me out in the first place. But I got banned because someone reported me to the local FA because I was different from everybody else. I was banned for 2 months. So it's mad how you just see how people's perception of, rather schools and teachers and coaches need to be more educated, but more trained, and seeing the social side of stuff as well, for what football can bring to people like myself, like Alison's, and like Bob's kids as well, to give them the confidence, because you can't do anything without confidence. But if football's a tool to bring people together, to give that opportunity to be themselves and be the best version of themselves, because no one's the same.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that kind of brings me neatly, I'll stay with you, Martin, because that brings me neatly on to the next thing I want to discuss, which is visibility. And Alison, I read a player profile of Lily on CP Sport, and it was interesting that in answer to one of the questions, what does she want to be when she grows up, she answered a lioness. And that shows that it kind of demonstrates the importance of visibility. If you can see it, you can be it. That's something that Martin's always taught me, and it's kind of, it does underline for me the importance of having role models and being able to look up to examples of people who are doing sport and thriving whilst doing it. And I wonder whether, Martin, you might be able to say something about the importance of that with your sort of Disability Football Collective hat on.
Yeah, like, for example, when I was younger, being mixed race and mixed heritage was easy because I had all my questions answered by my old man. But as a disabled person in the 80s and 90s and going to school and not seeing people like myself and seeing people who, it was quite negative perception because you can't do this, you can't do that. It was an eye-opener when I went and played football and seen so many people like myself, because everyone needs role models to look up to. Everyone needs those strengths, and seeing those people who are in those positive environments to see, go, if they can do it, I can do it. It's just a natural reaction and it's exactly the same with the Disability Football Collective. There's not enough disability representation. Not every disabled person wants to be a footballer, but want to be part of football, like they want to be a video analysis, a referee or a coach. But is there opportunities around if we're struggling finding people participating in people playing football and sports? It's going to be a lot harder trying to find those representation in those top if they want to be coaches and referees.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because obviously I wonder whether, Bob, your experience in your capacity as a coach, is visibility something that attracts more people to the game? Have you noticed an increase in the number of participants at the programme that you're running out of Bristol? Because of the kind of outreach that things like Alison are doing, and because of the things that Richard is doing with CP Sport and so on, has it actively increased the headcount, do you think?
It's hard because, go back, 4 years ago, I started with 4 or 5 players every week. And that to me was almost like a top side kind of thing. 5 players, I felt like we was going somewhere. The headcount has kind of picked up because we joined Bristol City. So that's a big name in the Southwest, obviously. Then you get to wear their kit. I mean, today I've just been up to Ashton Gate and collected all the kit. That's 35 kits for all the players. For them to put on that every season is phenomenal. Then we have done a lot of promotion, creating things like websites, putting stuff out on every single social media that there is. So we don't know what's really working, but we do know that people are talking, and it's the talking part that I think is probably the most attractive part. Casey's been, and I've been in the room with him. He went to had Botox in his face yesterday up in Bristol. And the paediatricians don't know who I am. I don't know who Casey is, but they say things just off the cuff like, oh, there's a football club, Bristol City Cerebral Palsy Football Club. You thought about joining them? So the paediatricians are now on board, which is what we want. But that's that verbal communication. Mums and dads are now starting to talk about the football club. And I know you were talking about Senko earlier. One of our welfare officers, Jane, she's part of Senko. So she's now distributing our football club around the Southwest and even further afield through Senko. So we know that there are avenues to explore, but to give a definitive on the head count, it's very difficult because we are going off in so many angles. But I do think, honestly, I think it is down to communication and creating that community environment when people turn up.
And do you, as Casey's, he's 17. Do you find that other kids in the in the program and the South, or even not just the Bristol one, do you find that other kids are looking up to him and trying to sort of like emulate him? And is that something that, because I'm just conscious of the role modeling and just make it, that might encourage more people into the game. Is that something that you've experienced?
Yeah, so with Casey is one of the, he's a coach. He's a level 1 coach, or an introduction to football coach. Now they've changed the system. He's just applied for level C, UEFA level C coaching as well. But he coaches all of the players every single week. So he does the lineups, he does all the warm-ups and everything else. But as a goalkeeper, he's an inspiration. But as a person, he's an inspiration. And it's very important, because I always say to Casey, in a way, I feel like I've let him down, because it would have been nice to have found what we've created when Casey was like Lily's age, because the benefit that Lily's going to get and everybody else that are younger is huge, because the support that they've got. You know, me just putting out about Casey's surgery and Corey's surgery and Eloise's surgery, the amount of support that they get from all the parents and from all the other children is just phenomenal. So having people to look up to is important, but support is so key. I mean, today, you know, I don't always like from Martin growing up, but surgery just seems to be the main thing for cerebral palsy today. And, you know, some of it is, I guess, it's very successful, and some of it is less successful. We've lost a player who went in for surgery on both legs and, you know, ended his playing career. That was it. It was all over. So we all have that in the back of our minds when we hear that children are going to go for surgery. But you've got to support it. You've got to 100% back it as much as you possibly can. But yeah, you need those people to look up to. You really do.
Alison, I wonder whether you had anything to say on that, because obviously Lily's still quite young, isn't she? Is she 11, 12? 12?
She's 12, just turned 12. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and she's just getting started. I noticed in that CP Claire profile that she is a fan of Jack Grealish. She's not going to be Southgate's biggest fan for leaving him out of the squad going into Euros. But I just wonder whether it's, you know, she's at the stage where she's looking up to some of the more senior players at the club and thinking, you know, that's where I want to be.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned earlier that Lily wanted to be a lioness. It was when the women won the Euros that she said, please, please, please find me a football club. You know, that was aspirational. But then, you know, we're so thankful to have found the club. The problem is, where does that go for her in the future? If she does want to go ahead and be a lioness, still lots of investment needs to be made at club level and in a pathway potentially for her. And the thing with cerebral palsy football is it's not for the able disabled. A lot of high profile people who have a disability are more able than a lot of people with a disability. You know, 15% of the population have a disability, and most people with cerebral palsy couldn't then go on to do the Paralympics, and we're fully aware of that. But I do think with cerebral palsy football, it is fairer. The grading seems fairer, and, you know, it's almost cerebral palsy at grassroots level. What cerebral palsy football at grassroots level is what we're doing at Bristol City. And I do believe there is a future for her, as long as there is a pathway and lots of investment is made into the sport, developing the female part of cerebral palsy football too.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And Richard, I'd like to come to you on that, because obviously, you know, in your capacity at CP Sport, you know, part of what you do is increasing visibility, reaching out to clubs, reaching out to special interest groups, reaching out to local authorities, and so on. And I wonder whether you're seeing the creation of these pathways, and whether it's everywhere, whether it's just in some places, whether it's good enough. You know, I'd just appreciate your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm quite fortunate enough to actually be linked with the FA, so I do see a lot of what's currently going on as the main part of my role of trying to increase these opportunities. You know, persuade clubs to take up the opportunities to start up CP football, frame football. But in terms of the pathway, so we have the National Cerebral Palsy Football League, which is a open age to 16 plus league. Alongside that, it has mixed gender dispensation, so males and females can both play together within that. The thing with the pathway is there's no youth divisions, sort of like national youth CP league necessarily. So And that's something which we want to look to get towards, to try and encourage that, get teams on board, and see if there's that sort of pathway that we can create. Because currently, as it stands, there's local leagues, so pan disability leagues, so ability counts leagues. But people with cerebral palsy don't necessarily want to play within pan disability. They would like a cerebral palsy league opportunity to play in. So they have the local pan disability leagues that they could play in. And currently, in terms of the pathway, it's going towards that National CP Football League, which does actually have some CP England football players playing within it, as that part of that is able to happen, so they can play within that. So there is a potential pathway there. And I know, working with the FA at the moment, and Bristol City CP quite on board as well with female football satellite centres that we're starting up across the country to try and improve, get more females with CP into football. So we're starting those up, and Bristol City are going to start one. And alongside that, linking to the FA, they currently have a female development group. So they get together females with CP, open age, to this development group, some training sessions throughout the year, in the hope that their next step that they would like is an England female CP football team. So there's lots to come. I do get that sort of insight, but we need to get that communication out there, making people aware of it. It's exactly like you said, Bob, with the communication. We need to get people just being more aware of what's around them. And
well, I mean, that's encouraging for people in Lily's position. I mean, that's a lot. I wasn't aware that there was this. That we were that far along in the pathways to creating an women's England CP football team, and that's kind of that I'm sure that would be music to Lily's ears. That there's something beyond the youth structure that she can look forward to in time. And Martin, I wonder whether I could get your thoughts on that, because I wasn't really aware that that some of the pathways, there was kind of a flow through to the England side. I don't know. Was that wasn't exactly your journey for being called up for England, was it? It wasn't part of a national CP league through which you ended up playing for England, was it?
No, so my journey was like a pan disability journey down Plymouth Argyle, and they obviously went into like a Devon Cornwall pan disability league, which I got spotted from there. But everyone's doing great work with the FA, and obviously it's only small steps at the moment. Obviously with the pathways, and hopefully in the future there'll be women's CP, women's blind. I know there's a women's visually impaired group as well, which is class. But like I said before, the FA are slowly and surely doing things that need to be put in place for people with disabilities and people with cerebral palsy, just to be the next England star.
Yeah, it's actually very encouraging. The next topic, really, I mean, that was all very linked. The next topic I wanted to move on to is how important are third parties, so local authorities, charities, special interest groups, business and tech innovators. These things, they all coalesce around sport for able-bodied persons naturally, but also when those third parties get involved, sponsorship from businesses, interest from the media. How important is it that there is support from those third parties, as well as the local authorities and regulators driving it? It's about getting the wider communities, whether that's business community, tech community, media. How important is that in driving the sort of disability sport revolution? I wonder whether we could start potentially with you there, Richard.
Yeah, no problem. So very important is the short answer, but in terms of that, it's trying to get the outreach to people with CP to make them aware of the opportunities. And you might have someone with cerebral palsy linked to a different disability organisation who's not aware of opportunities around them, not aware of CP Sport, not aware of the FA necessarily, not aware of Bristol City CP. So it's really important to get them on board and get them talking to each other, and that outreach to the organisations is what we need. So just making them aware of what's happening, but more so if someone is aware of someone with CP who would like to get into football or sport in general, just doing their own sort of research to find out what's happening in the area, or if they find CP Sport, they get in touch with us, and then we can make them aware of what's happening. Just everyone needs to be talking to each other and actually trying to do what they can to show the opportunities that are out there for people with cerebral palsy.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. But and I'm just wondering, the things like sponsorship. I mean, the international CP tournament. Alison, I'll come to you on this one briefly, because the international CP tournament, you obviously retracted, high profile keynote speakers. You've attracted sponsors, and each of those angles, they're bringing their own attention to the game, and they're bringing their own attention to the and their own audience to the event itself, and to CP Sport generally. And I wonder what your views are on the importance of third-party contributors raising awareness, but like sponsors, the local business community, for example.
Third-party sponsors are critical to events like the football festival that we're running, and also to the club for two reasons. The first one is visibility. Parents and children, a club like Bristol City Cerebral Palsy FC, we don't have a voice. We don't have a platform to talk about what we're doing to attract more players to the club and attract vital funds to the club. So to get a partner, a local business on board is invaluable, because they in turn have their own networks which they can promote what we do, and they can give lots of support that we wouldn't otherwise receive. Also, key people like Gabby Logan is our patron. She commands a lot of attention. If Gabby Logan is in a press release or she's doing a piece to camera, you've automatically got her attention. And the fact that she's aligned herself with our club will give us a much wider audience than we could ever aspire to. Jack Grealish's sister, we all know she's got cerebral palsy, because he's Jack Grealish. And that's brought attention to cerebral palsy from, a very high profile footballer. What he could potentially do for the sport and for children with cerebral palsy is, it's mind-blowing. So the first reason is visibility, but the second reason is also much needed funds and sponsorship. Without sponsors, we could not do the festival. We've tried to do different events over the last couple of years, and it's always tapping into our own families. And it's, the children, they've got cerebral palsy, they do fun runs. Casey jumped out of an aeroplane. We can't keep asking them to do that when they're already giving so much by just playing football and doing their rehabilitation. We can't go to the same people trying to just raise funds just to give them an experience and just to let us operate. So they give us much needed sponsorship to host events like the International Football Festival, but also just operating costs. As we develop, we will want to go to different grounds and play different teams, but that costs money. It costs money to get a bus. And as a parent of a child with cerebral palsy, because I don't get any physio, I have to pay for physio privately. I have to pay for lots of things. A child with a disability needs a lot more. They need computers. They need a lot more, which isn't funded necessarily by the LEA. So already you're investing a lot of money in that child. And then on top of that, if you're having to pay to go to different grounds and, support activities outside of Bristol, it all costs money. And a lot of our parents don't have it. So much needed sponsorship will go towards supporting the children and make sure that they don't miss out, because money is an issue for a lot of our parents.
Yeah, and on that note, it on the costs and the funding, it's I wonder whether it's I suppose I should come to Bob, Richard, Martin, anyone really who would like to pitch in here, but maybe let's start with Bob, because it's what I find really kind of it's a little bit disappointing is how expensive some of the tech aids and equipment are for kids with CP. There's. I was looking at some of the costs of, given all the other costs that Alison was mentioning, things like a K-walker or a game frame, something like that. They start at about £400, and obviously local authority spending and NHS spending, they're not going to be getting on that. So that's something that's coming out of the pockets of parents almost always. And I wonder whether, further to what Alison said, whether funding in that aspect is a bit of a barrier still, because it's, getting kids into the game is hard enough. Once they get there, they then have to, if they then have to shell out £400 for a frame, it's just yet another barrier. Is that something you've encountered, Bob?
Not necessarily equipment-wise, but if you go to something like wheelchair football, a wheelchair will cost you £10,000 upwards. So something like that is, it's holding clubs back from developing, because no one has 10 grand they can just completely go and get and then give it to a child to wreck around, going around chasing a football. But that's what they need. Going back a little bit on what you've been talking about, I think some of you also struggle to understand where it's very easy to sit on the outside and try and promote a child or try and promote a football club. But sometimes, look at it from our perspective, we find it difficult to promote children that aren't allowed to be promoted. So if you've got children that are in foster care, or you've got children that are on the verge of going from DLA payments to PIP payments, they don't want to be on a public website or a public Facebook page where they are being analysed by the government and they could lose payment or funding, which they've spent years trying to get. So you are trying to raise money and you are trying to raise awareness, but these things are also holding us back. And we've all seen what the government's doing about vouchers for PIP and all that kind of thing. It's terrorising the disability community because of what's going on. And even my son, we spent the last 18 months, we was meant to be going to court in August. We won out of court, but we shouldn't be having to fight. So promotion is key to trying to raise funds. But you've also got to understand at the end of the day, some of these people don't want to go out there. And I've said this to Alison, I want sponsors on board, but I'm conscious of the fact that I don't want to be selling our children. So it's a hard one for me to say, yeah, it's a good idea to have sponsors on board and they can pay for equipment and they can provide opportunities. But in another way, you can actually take those opportunities away if it's not done properly.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's also a feeling of, why should they have to rely on that method of fundraising as well? It should be a right access to sport, given that it is, so fundamental for a child's physical and mental health. That it should be a right, not a privilege, and therefore there's that fine balance to walk between getting sponsorship, raising funds, and then the government sitting on its laurels and feeling like, well, that gap's being filled privately, we don't need to fill it publicly. But actually, what we want is for there to be adequate public provision for this, so that those gaps don't need to be filled with other more precarious methods of funding, which are less reliable. And so I think there is a bit of a failure of government there. But completely take your point. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, on a slightly lighter note, is I wonder whether we could just talk about we know what the benefits are for health, but I wonder whether we could talk just briefly about the community aspects of being involved in disability sport and a CP football club and so on for children, but also for families. And I wonder perhaps whether we could start with you, Martin, on that one.
Yeah, I think obviously when you've got a community, when you got, and for example, a club like Bristol City, it brings people together, share different experiences of different, with their CP and stuff. And as well, parents as well. I think when I got diagnosed, there was not enough help for parents, for my mum and dad around sharing their experiences of cerebral palsy back in the 80s, because there wasn't a lot of education and knowledge around cerebral palsy, probably still not enough now till this day. So with the Bristol City stuff, what they're doing, amazing stuff. It brings, like I said, it brings people together and gives people a platform to succeed and share experiences with parents and give them life choices as well. And it also breaks barriers down as well with the inclusion of their disability.
I wonder, Richard, or just before I get back and get the other comments on that topic, I wanted to talk to you quickly, Richard, about CP Sport, very focused on active participation. One thing that that Martin and I have discussed at length before, well, two things really. Firstly, that I think one of the biggest problems is that whilst regulatory bodies are quite good at getting behind the sport in the sense of promoting it, and the media lags behind quite a lot. And it's quite there's quite a lot of there's still that sense of, well, if you want to see a particular the CP sport, then press the red button, and that's not really the way that we want to be promoting. That's not really the way we want to be. We want the media to be promoting disability sport. And so I wonder what your thoughts are on the media lagging behind the regulators and governing bodies. And secondly, whether you could touch on the fact that another thing that Martin and I discuss quite regularly is the fact that it's not just participation in the sport itself, in the actual game. It's participation in the sport generally. Do CP Sport have any ideas about what if they want to get into video analytics? What if the child wants to be involved in the game as a linesman, a groundsman, a referee, a coach, a manager? What are we looking at those sort of routes as well, and whether we can provide for people that don't just want to play?
Yeah, absolutely. So coming back to the first question, just sort of around like the media, it's certainly still lagging behind by quite a far mile, and like there's things which have come out just recently, like such as the FA Disability Cup getting shown on TNT Sports, which I think is really important for the sports. But we need to see more stuff like that going on, advertisement, social media, just everybody actually posting about the stuff which is going on. I think there's a lot of stuff where people are like, oh, I don't feel like I could post something about disability sport, I might get in trouble or something like that. But you're like, no, you're actually actively helping, trying to promote what's going on. There's things that you have to do in terms of safeguarding and things like that within youth sport, but that's not just disability football, that's across in the mainstream game anyway. So so I think we need more from certain like media wanting to get involved and actively promote stuff that is happening. I've seen some success stories, which I think is great for the sport. So a lady in Yorkshire who is a coach, and she got recognised for an award as one of the grassroots volunteers of the year. And she coaches within CP football. So it's more coverage, things like that, which I think people need to get on board with. I believe that was BBC Yorkshire, if I'm not mistaken. But that's the types of things that we need to see more of. It's certainly still lagging behind quite a bit. You just see like one success story sort of every now and then, whereas you're seeing a lot of success stories in the mainstream game. We want to see more for a disability sport point of view. In terms of your second question, in terms of, sorry Ben, could you just remind me a bit around?
It's more about pathways into for children with CP, for example, who may not want to actually go on to be a player. What if they want to coach? I mean, obviously, Bob's son has gone on to qualify as a coach, but that's most of the time. Kids with CP are still being coached by able-bodied coaches, for example. So what if they want to get into coaching? What if they wanted to go into video analysis? What if they wanted to be a ref? What if they wanted to be a linesman? What if they wanted to be a groundsman? And so on. It's important that there's. Do you agree? I suppose that it's important that there are role models elsewhere in the game. And are there any particular movements on that that CP Sport or yourself are aware of, and how people with disabilities could look to follow a career path that might not actually be actively playing, if that's their choice?
Yeah, so it's very important to have those role models, and certainly, like we've spoken about in regards to like our national CP football league, that we would like more representation from people with CP, such as within the committee. But it's that making people aware that they have that opportunity to go into some of these roles. Or any role, to be honest. I'd say probably they maybe feel like that they can't because they don't see that that media coverage of someone with CP going in and actually doing that. So yeah, there is quite a bit out there in terms of support, but it's making people with CP aware of that. So, for example, Bob, you mentioned with Casey, you said Casey's done his introduction to coaching football course. Something to look up, Bob, if you haven't already, is that there's potential fully funded places or part funded places through the FA for underrepresented groups. So that's something which can be looked at to help, because the courses aren't cheap. The parade costs, I think the introduction course costs around £160. Well, when you're as a parent having to fork out all the money that you already do for your child, are you able to do that again for them? £160 for a course. So there's fully funded places and partly funded places that they can apply for through the FA. There's also opportunities to go and get into refereeing. So there are courses that they can do. They can still do the same FA referee course. They just might be a bit nervous about going and doing that in amongst people who maybe don't have a disability. So I think it's just making them aware that they can have that opportunity and they will be supported through that, and the tutor can be made aware of their disability, so they can find out how they can best support them during it, and might turn around and say, I don't need any extra support, I just want to do the course. So that's the kind of information I need to find out. It's all about being brave and taking that first step. At the same time, they also need to be aware that the opportunity is there for them.
Yeah. Bob, did you find that there was that? Was it your idea that your son did the coaching course, or did that come from him? How did you find that it was fairly straightforward to get involved in that?
Yeah, so I have a slightly different perspective as a father and as someone who's in a privileged position as myself to have lots of kids that are looking for different avenues. So we try and steer them. So we look at what they're good at on the pitch, whether they're communicating well, how they engage with other people, talking about confidence. Lots of times we try and build on confidence. Things like becoming a coach helps with that, because it will encourage you to talk to other people openly. But it also puts you on the spot, like a Zoom call, where you don't have a lot of time to think about what you're going to be up against. So, I've got 4 coaches in my group, all at the age of 16 to 18. They've all done the basic level 1 course. In my opinion, it's absolutely horrendous course, through the FA. It's all done on computers. I've done the level 1 course. I was there with 32 other coaches. I was the only one who was doing disability football, and I had to put them in dark glasses. I had to put all of the coaches in bibs and make them put one arm inside their bibs. And I had to make them understand. I also put headphones on some of them as well, just to make them understand what it's like to be a disabled person. Because it doesn't matter. My son's also a referee, but it's okay saying these things are available, and it's okay getting the certificate, but where do you then go with it? And that's one of the problems which we're talking about in football in general, the pathway through the FA. There doesn't seem to be anywhere. If you pick up the phone or you talk to somebody and say, oh, yeah, my son's a referee, but he's got cerebral palsy, they're like, okay, great, well, I'll get back to you. What they really mean is we've got someone else in mind. And it goes back to the CP player being put in goal or the CP player being put on the bench. The education in society is poor because CP, like I said before, is an umbrella. It's having an understanding of a classification from the F1s to the F3s, FT3s. It's sometimes I almost feel like we need to invite half the population down to my football club to see the difference in some of these children, to see the difference having 2 hours mates by being each other. We hear stories all the time. Me and Alison hear this every weekend. My son has changed so much since he's joined your football club. Not the 2 hours here, but at school, in and around other times. It's not about those 2 hours. It's about what we try and give them for the rest of their life. So we explore avenues. Refereeing is a great one because it's physical, but it keeps you in the game and it gives you a different perspective. Coaching is amazing because the journey is there forever. As Martin will come to agree, your football career will end one day. I went to Imperial Sports today and there was about 45 players all on the football pitch and the minimum age was 60. So it doesn't have to end, but for some of us, unfortunately, it will end. But the avenues for coaching is phenomenal. As far as Case is concerned, he's going to go on and he will coach for England. If the FA don't let him in as a goalkeeper, he's going to go in and he will coach England because that's his determination. People with cerebral palsy, and I can say this, have inspiration inside of them because it's just part of their DNA. And that's what he hears all the time from his friends. Oh, you're lucky. Oh, you're lucky. Oh, well, you got an opportunity. He's not lucky. There's no luck. It's all hard work, determination, drive, passion. And you only get that by getting onto that football pitch, talking to people, associating yourself with something, and then saying, I'm going to go and achieve something today that I didn't achieve yesterday. So I would agree. We do need to have other avenues. But my question to the FA is, what's at the end of it? Casey is struggling to referee matches. He referees for all the ability counts games. So he referees pan disability, which is fantastic. It's an amazing opportunity. But he's good enough and quick enough to keep up with 11-a-side football or 9-a-side.
Yeah.
Coaching. The coaching course, I don't know if anybody else has done the level 1 coaching recently, but I mean, I personally, I would not encourage anybody to do it anymore because it is so shockingly bad. It's unbelievable. You want a coach to go and stand in front of people and be creative. But you want to do that on a computer. It doesn't work. No. So we need to give them the confidence.
It's too one size fits all, isn't it? It's kind of, it's a really broad brush for what is essentially like you said, there's all the different classifications just within CP itself, and that's before you even get to pan disability. And so a computer course really doesn't seem to cut it. Alison, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, Lily's obviously probably too young to be thinking about long-term career options other than playing for CP England. But I wonder what your thoughts are about the other avenues available. And just because they're there, as Bob says, doesn't mean that they're adequate. And what comes at the end of it.
I think any of the children who play for Bristol City, Cerebral Palsy Football Club, any of them have the capacity to be data analysts, video editors, and groundsmen, bookkeepers, marketing, advertising. The world's their oyster, but it's about what is their frame of reference. Your frame of reference is what you encounter growing up. Otherwise, you don't know these opportunities exist. So it's about again, visibility and inclusion, so children can get the opportunity to play for a club and know what kind of roles are associated with it in terms of, visibility and inclusion. But unfortunately, it comes back to an endemic thing with our society. 15% society has a disability, or 15% of newsreaders, do they have a disability? Do 15% of teachers have a disability? I don't know. I mean, I hope at one day it would just be not even a topic that we have to discuss. That person is that person, regardless of their disability. But in terms of furthering their career in a football environment, it's all about exposure and what their frame of reference is at an early age, so they know what's possible. And again, it's investment to get as many people participating as we can, so they know what opportunities there are out there. At the minute, Lily has talked about life after playing for England, and then that's via winning the Olympics on a horse. She's got very high aspirations, and her frame of reference is that she wants to give back and do rehabilitation for children with cerebral palsy, because that's her frame of reference. So the more opportunities we give children, the better. Because if it wasn't for clubs like Bristol City, Lily wouldn't be playing football at all. She did try grassroots, but unfortunately, I had to pull her out of that because it's just a safeguarding thing. It's not safe for a child with cerebral palsy and, a girl to play against fast, strong opposition without a disability.
Yeah, no, I completely get it. And I think it's great that, firstly, she's obviously a very driven young lady, isn't she? I mean, they're just going to play for England and win a gold medal in a completely different sport as well. It's just, I'll take it in my stride. Martin, this brings me on neatly to the Disability Football Collective, because this is something that you were very keen to explore, because obviously your journey was one, firstly as a player, but then it was as a coach. You were at Sensibility and all that as well, and so you've always been keen to emphasise that it's about participation in the game as a whole, not just in a playing capacity, and therefore it's you've always wanted to have that mentoring and role modelling side to the Disability Football Collective, and that's kind of been quite a central focus of the research that the DFC are invested in with Leeds Beckett. I wonder whether you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Like I said, there's not much data around disabled people in a workplace, in a football environment. I think we have to have those uncomfortable conversations, and I think how many people are in those decision-making roles who make those decisions to help the next generation of disabled people going into working in the game. And I think the FA need to be proactive instead of reactive. I think courses, like Bob said, with the level ones and level twos, I think the environment has to change. I think the organisations and companies need to change and look at a different way of thinking, because more and more disabled people want to be in football, and it's not if it's not playing football, but they want to be part of something, and that's what it's all about, really. To be honest, to change that next generation, to inspire that next generation, and someone wants to be the next KC and the next other people want to be, who wants to be into coaching, into refereeing. That's what it's all about, because at the end of the day, the perception of a disabled person at the moment is rubbish, really, to be honest, because it's focusing on what they can't do. But we need to get more people in those boardrooms and those decision-making roles to change those perceptions, because I don't think people at the top really think about disability. I think people, like, you see the women's game from where it was 20 years ago and look where it is today, because people in those different in those roles looking at it totally different. It's exactly the same with disability. I think we're about 15, 20 years behind everybody else, and I think we need to change that.
Yeah, it is, and that kind of brings me back to the community thing, because obviously, if you're part of the setup that you guys have got at Bristol City is just absolutely incredible. But if you think about the community aspect of it, what if you are stopping? What if you do have to stop playing? What if you do have an operation that takes you out of it? What if what if you get to an age and there isn't a particular provision for the senior game in your classification in your region? Should you be in a position where you have to lose the community that you've built up over the years, just because you've come out of actively participating by playing? Because it wouldn't happen in the able-bodied sport. You'd still find yourself a role in the club, or you still find yourself a role in the sport. There are other avenues available to you. So I don't think it's just important for for provision of opportunity. I think it's for maintenance of the community as well. And I wonder whether Bob or Alison, let's start with Alison, whether you have any thoughts on that, about the fact that it's not just it isn't just about the opportunity to play, it's about solidifying that community.
Yeah, I mean, Bob's always been really good that if you aren't able to play and you want to be connected to the club, he will always find a role for you, because if you want to be part of the club, you are welcome. We have a coach that comes occasionally, Riley. He's not ambulant, he can't play, but he's part of the club. He participates. If he wants to support it, then we always welcome him with welcome arms. But the community aspect is so critical. If Lily fell out of love with football in the future, I can't see it, but if studies got in her way and she just didn't have the time to commit to progressing at a higher level, she'd still want to be connected to the club, even if it's just all she does was turn up on that Saturday, because she's made those friendships now, and they are for life. And you have to think, we are in a town, a very small town. We don't know another soul with cerebral palsy. Lily has never met another child with cerebral palsy. You're almost in this society, you set them up to fail. You put them against able-bodied people at sports day. Her only exposure to football prior to Bristol City was grassroots, where, it's dangerous for her. So now to actually find people with cerebral palsy that understand that she doesn't have to always be trying to be the best version of herself. She can just be herself. If she's not immediately understood because cerebral palsy affects her speech, people get it and they're patient and they listen. Whereas, peers, when you're a young child growing up, peers can almost sometimes either take on the role of carers or they're just off on their own agenda. And it's really difficult, but it's such a family environment, such an inclusive environment. I would hate to see that would be lost if Lily were to stop playing for some reason.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a common thread from all of the contributors today, which is essentially that as much as the physical benefits, the community is just it's fundamental. And but there are still a few barriers to making sure that there are other options available if you have to come off the pitch. But obviously at the club, Bob and yourself are doing great work to make sure that that's not the case. And the example you gave is really heartwarming, to be honest. It's just because you should never feel that you're not part of the club anymore just because you can't lace up. And I think that's really important. And that has taken us to exactly an hour. So unless there's anything else that anyone wants to have a chat about, I think we'll wrap up. I just want to say thank you to all of you. That was a really, really good discussion, and I really appreciate all of your contributions.